Welcome to Films and Stuff with your hosts, Pete Mitchell and Ethan Hunt.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Films and Stuff podcast. I am Ethan and brought to you by the letter P for Pete today. Good morning, Pete. How are you?
I am great, Ethan. How are you?
Everything is wonderful here as well. It is our weekly stream or skip segment. I always introduce you. I introduce the segment. Then I switch off my mic and let you talk for 15 seconds where you explain to our listeners, old and new, what is stream or skip all about?
Ethan and I have prepared lists of TV shows for each other to watch. Every week, we randomly assign each other one show to watch. We watch at least 2 episodes if it's a series, and on that basis, we determine if that show is worthy of being streamed or skipped.
Streamed or skipped. Well said, well explained. This week, you had Apple TV Plus again.
Yeah, I did.
A show called Dark Matter.
I did. And in fact, it was a show that you were quite interested in as well. I think you've seen it as well, right?
I did not see it, but I know where I know this from. I have read the book.
Okay. That's why it was familiar to you.
I have read the book. Yes. So tell us about it and let's compare if the book is the same as the show.
Sure. So Dark Matter, it's a sci-fi show, as you would expect based on the title, Apple TV. It's a 2024 streaming program. It's quite interesting, quite good. Let me give you a breakdown. It's about a scientist who is basically just a normal run-of-the-mill physics professor at some university. And his wife is working at an art gallery of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
In any case, he has what would be considered a very good but relatively mundane life. They've got a young teenage boy who wants to learn to drive.
Yep.
He works at a university, but, he's not maybe the best professor, or, he's not someone who's very noteworthy.
It's also not like he's not like a professor at a Harvard or this is in Chicago. So it's not Northwestern. It's, I don't want to say a community college, but it's kind of a local college. Can you say?
Yeah.
A little bit Walter White, kind of like Walter White, who is like the high school, like chemistry teacher, right?
Yeah. I mean, this guy's clearly very intelligent, as you would expect any professor to be at any university.
Yeah.
But you're right. He's not exactly working in a very prestigious or in a very glamorous university or job.
Mm-hmm.
The show kind of goes out of their way to show that he seems like he's in a dead-end life. But the reality is that it's not dead-end. It's just standard, right?
Yeah.
And it almost feels like he was meant for more, but hasn't achieved it. Yeah. And then you see that because one of his close friends, who's also a scientist, works with him, wins this special prestigious science award or prize. And he raises a ton of funding for his own new neurological tech startup or some kind of physics startup or some kind of, let's call it generic science startup.
Yeah.
His friend then offers him to move out to San Francisco with him to join that, but he declines because he's married. He doesn't want to upend his life. That's what I mean. You know what I mean? It's not dead end, but at the same time, it's not exciting. And he seems like a guy who's just kind of bored, even though he's not. And on that night that he goes to the bar to celebrate with his friend, and the night that he gets a job offer, on the way home, he gets kidnapped at gunpoint by a mysterious stranger who's hooded and wearing a mask.
Right.
He gets taken to a warehouse, he gets sedated, and then he wakes up. But when he wakes up, his life is completely flipped upside down. He now realizes he's married to someone else. He doesn't have a kid. He's the one who won the prize. He's got a huge tech company of his own that he's the kind of head scientist at. And he's super confused because he doesn't know where his original wife is. He doesn't know where his kid is. He doesn't understand what's going on.
Yeah.
And spoiler alert, we learn the person who had kidnapped him at gunpoint was actually him from another universe. And what happened was in this other universe, he's the one who won the science prize. He's the one who started the tech foundation. He's the one who didn't get married to that girl that he had the kid with. And at his new startup, he created a machine that allowed him to travel to other universes and to other alternate dimensions. And so what happened was the alternate version of him kidnapped him to swap places with him. Because even though he was the successful one in this universe, he didn't like his life and he wanted to swap places.
It's not a time travel movie. It's an alternate universe movie,
Yes,
right?
exactly. And
Like he
so,
doesn't go back in time. He just goes the same date and then he's just in a different parallel universe.
And so,
Yeah.
it's one of those classical cliched, where like one decision changes your entire life and you branch
Right.
off and create an alternate reality.
The what if.
The what if scenario, kind of like what we saw in Peripheral, right? Where you have the different multi branches of the same universe.
Yeah.
Right. So that's what happens. And even though it's not explained in the first two episodes, I saw it coming a mile away from the very first episode.
Yeah.
You and I are sci-fi buffs because we've seen all the tropes, we've read all the cliches, we've made the same stereotypes in our, our own jokey stories and all the tropes that we've done before. We've seen it all. This is really good. The production values are fantastic. Everything looks good. It's in current day, so it's not like far off into the future. There are no flying cars, that kind of thing.
Right.
It's a mystery series where you can tell clearly what's going to happen is the next 6, 8, 10 episodes, whatever it is, he's going to work with his alternate reality wife to figure out how to get back to his own reality and either kill the guy or bring him back. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's very clear to me that's what's going to happen. There may be a few twists and turns here, but you remember that show you recommended, the J.K. Simmons one in Europe?
Oh, yeah. In Berlin, that took place in Berlin.
Yes.
With the tunnel underneath Berlin. I can't
It's
remember what's that called.
exactly the same premise. It's exactly the same premise, which is to say that this guy gets replaced by his alternate universe's self.
Right.
Yeah, and it's now a question of how do I get back to my own universe and how do I bring not justice, but how do I take back my own life?
Right.
This is a really strong mooch for me. And it's on the verge. There are times where I think it could be a must subscribe, but because we've seen this trope before and because you and I kind of aren't surprised by these things anymore, I hesitate to call this a must subscribe. Now, I want to continue watching this. I imagine if the mystery gets stronger or if there's like a crazy plot twist in there, this could be a must subscribe just because I want to see my expectations get subverted.
Yeah.
I don't see that happening, but for someone who's maybe not necessarily the strongest sci-fi fan, like someone like my parents, I imagine this would be very interesting for them because it's sci-fi without being too sci-fi. It's not about the technology. It's not about this box that allows them to transfer between two different dimensions. It's just a story about a guy who gets his life taken over.
That's right. Let me add a little bit of my context to this because I knew this sounded so familiar and I couldn't place, I knew I didn't see it. So I watched 2 episodes and I knew I never saw the show before, but then I remembered that I read the book years and years and years ago. And the dude who wrote this book, I don't know, maybe it was still called Dark Matter. He wrote a second book as well that is way better than this.
Okay.
The difference between this show and the book I found was the book was really difficult to follow in terms of how it was describing the science.
Okay.
And therefore the show, they show like this cube, right?
Yeah.
The cube was a lot easier when you just saw it. It didn't need all this explanation of what it was. It was
Yeah.
clear what it was.
Yeah.
The book, I was a little bit like, I got the gist of it, but like if you would have asked me to draw what I was reading, it would have looked totally different than the show. So I think the series was better from that visual perspective. I agree with everything else you said. The only B plot conflict I have, or maybe it's even the A plot, is that I was not really emotionally invested in this guy's quote unquote problem. Like, as the successful scientist, I hear him that basically, if you look at the universe of the successful scientist, right?
Yeah.
He had this yearning for the love of his life, that he kind of gave up on the relationship and chose working long hours in the laboratory or research or whatever he did, instead of kind of pursuing this, what in his mind was a really great relationship, right? And now he's saying, hey, I've got an opportunity to kind of go to an alternate universe and live that life. That would really fulfill me. And I mean, there's a good story in there somewhere, but it's also not clear to me how he would know that there's an alternate universe where he does have a successful marriage. I mean, he could have, I don't know if I missed it, but unless he went to like 1,000 different universes or 100 or 12, I'm sure in some universes he married this person and they got divorced. They had an unhappy marriage, like so many other problems, right?
There was so I don't know if they allude to that, but there was one thing that you noticed in that first episode is you see the alternate universe scientist take out a notebook and make notes as to what happened during the day.
Oh, I see.
So that when he replaced him, he didn't, like, he knew what the story of the day was. So clearly he had been following them. And remember, he was gone for 14 months.
Yeah, that's right.
So he's been following them for at least that long.
Okay. So that's a good catch. That was my first issue. And then the second issue was, I guess I didn't really buy. So I get the scientist, like he's got everything, but he's unfulfilled, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess there's always a grass is greener on the other side, and that's what he wants to do. And he checks all his other alternate universes, and he thinks that's the best one. I'm not really convinced about the other guy. So the other guy's in, as you mentioned, a very happy, like, family situation. He's got a loving wife. He's got a son. Yes, he's kind of in a dead end place, professionally. But then he gets transported to this new universe. Very, very strange for him, of course. He doesn't know what's going on. But eventually he finds out that he's this renowned scientist.
Yeah.
Has kind of everything reputationally, everything financially that he could want. Is he really so unhappy, like in the first day, hours, that he's got to get back to his old life? Or would he just be like, so this is a what if? Maybe I should just like embrace it and live it out and see what happens, right? I felt like he was a little bit too aggressive in the, I got to get out of here, I got to get back before dinner kind of thing.
Yeah. And for someone as quote unquote smart as he is, like, you couldn't have figured out that it was him who's kidnapped himself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know how I immediately knew that this was going to be the premise of the show was because in the first 5 minutes, he talks about Schrodinger's cat to his class. He talks about superposition, where one thing can be two different things at the same time. Right. And I was like, okay, well, obviously that means there's going to be, when I saw the mascot, I was like, oh, well, that's obviously him. Yeah.
Oh, good pickup. I mean, it's very solid. Jennifer Connelly is great. Who's the dude?
Joel Edgerton.
Oh, yeah. What else have we seen him in?
We've seen him in a lot, but nothing that I can place my hand.
Yeah. It's exactly the kind of, I'm sure he'd be disappointed by that, but it's true. It's a compliment in a way.
Yeah.
What's your score for this?
So this is a strong mooch. with the
Mhm.
possibility that it'll get upgraded to a must subscribe by the time I end the series.
Okay.
I'm skeptical that I'll get it up there, but at the same time, I'm always hoping. So this is a strong, strong mooch.
All right. So that's Dark Matter, Apple TV Plus, strong mooch from Pete. All right. Let's shift gears a little bit. I had an assignment from Paramount Plus,
We haven't
which
been there in a while.
I was going to say, I think you had something on Paramount Plus earlier in the year.
Yeah.
This is my first Paramount Plus, and it's called Sexy Beast, which I have to say, just by title, I thought I was going to hate it. I don't know what I was expecting. I was expecting something like a Vampire Diaries, maybe.
Okay.
Like something where the guy's like a vampire or a witch or something, and he's got like this like very vibrant like life as a mortal on Earth, but deep down, he's actually the devil's son or a vampire werewolf or something like this. Nothing like that at all. Nothing like that at all. So, first of all, it is an 8-episode series. There is absolutely going to be a season 2, so you will like that. And it is the prequel to a movie that was released, I think, in 2000. The movie, also titled Sexy Beast, was very much a Guy Ritchie-like production.
Yeah.
Or I should say, at least the show is. So I assume that the movie is as well. And the movie had a great cast. Ben Kingsley, Ian McShane, super, super big cast. And I didn't see the movie, but I read the synopsis of the movie. So I'll tell you the synopsis of the movie, and then I'll go back and tell you what the prequel series is about. So the movie follows some former thieves. Like they had apparently big heists back in the day in London. And now they're retired. I think they're on the coast of Spain. And you see like the 3 or 4 of them kind of like enjoying the spoils of life, right? And we don't know how they got there, but we know that they apparently are enjoying a very, very peaceful, satisfying, wealthy retirement due to the riches that they gained during all these different heists, one or more. Now, the show itself, Sexy Beast, shows how this group came together. The main character, his name is Gary, but his nickname is Gal. And he's kind of got 2 different dudes in his life. One is Don and the other is H. These 3 are kind of like the masterminds. They start very kind of small time, and this is back in, I want to say this is kind of based in the 70s. I mean, it's definitely not, maybe it's the early 80s, but it seems to be a 70s kind of thing based on the technology, the cars. There's no cell phones at all. I mean, it's definitely 70s, 80s. I'd say it's probably like mid 70s kind of, where, I mean, they're guys that are just kind of like going up and they're picking locks, taking like the big wire cutters and cutting like, the deadbolt kind of stuff like that. Right. I mean, it's not so sophisticated. So you see them kind of like a small time, and they're not really a gang. They're just kind of like 3 guys who have separate jobs and separate lives, but from time to time they know of like a score, and it's like their side hustle, right? So it shows the show Sexy Beast shows kind of like how these guys started as small time, and then it escalates into some kind of like notorious gangster has identified that maybe they're very good at this and they want to steal something from a rival gangster. So they give Gal and Don and H, this offer that, hey, I want you to work for us and do this one job, and I'd really appreciate it. And this is the compensation. And then it also shows in the movie, the main character, Gal, is married to a lady named Dee Dee. And then we see the beginning of their relationship in the show as well. So they're not actually dating in the show. They know each other, and Gal is actually engaged to someone else who to be honest, I kind of like her more than his wife, but it just kind of shows the beginnings of all these different relationships. And you can see what it's kind of building towards. I watched the whole series, bigger and bigger, more sophisticated types of heists. And it shows, Gal is really kind of the mastermind. Don is a little bit like, he's definitely not the muscle, but he's kind of like the crazier hothead. And it just kind of like starts to show everyone's different personality, obviously leading up to, the events that got them into retirement in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
It is right up your alley. If there is a sweet spot in your world, I think it is a heist movie with a London twist, specifically Guy Ritchie style movies, right? So I think for you, this is a must subscribe. I went back and forth on it. I gave it a 5. I gave it a must subscribe. It's definitely not a skip. It is, how sometimes we've said a strong mooch.
Yeah.
This is probably a weak must subscribe. I mean, I watched the whole thing and it wasn't a struggle, and I'm about to do the hot take of the day.
Okay.
Of the week.
Here we go.
I don't find that there's actually anyone in this show that I like. Like it's not unlikable people, but there's no one that I really, really like. And what I was comparing it to, and here's my hot take, what I think may go down as the underrated best show of all time is Suits. And the reason I say that is that Suits, I know it's a stretch.
So funny.
I know
So
it's a stretch.
funny.
People like the characters in Suits. Everyone, like dudes like Harvey, right? Like almost, it's hard to say that anyone does not like Harvey as a character or kind of want to emulate him or think that he's like kind of a cool guy. Either they want to be him or they'd like a friend like him or they'd like to know someone like them. Everyone kind of likes Harvey. No one dislikes Mike Ross. You may not love him, but there's no one I think who would say like, I can't stand scenes with Mike Ross. He's horrible. He's a very good Robin to Harvey's Batman. Also, you have your foil, who's Louis Litt, right?
Yeah.
And generally, the foil is either a total buffoon. If you think back to kind of like the 80s sitcoms, it was always someone like Stephen Urkel.
Yeah.
Boner from Family Ties or right?
Growing
like every
Pains?
Growing Pains, right?
Yeah.
Family Ties had their own doofus. Like every show had their weird guy, right? Like even Full House had like Kimmy Gibbler. Like every show had their weird foil, right? And Louis Litt was actually kind of liked. And he was funny, even though he was totally over the top. I thought he filled that role very well. Another observation. People actually liked the love relationship between Harvey and Donna.
Yeah.
Right? Not over the top, very much like a Ross and Rachel. People were generally rooting for them and liked both of them. You had strong women characters. Right? The head of the law firm can't remember her name, but she was the head of the law firm. And 2, it appealed to, I mean, if you think of this kind of like platonic boyfriend, girlfriend, or the fiancés or husband, wife, kind of sitting on the sofa, watching a show, it kind of appealed to everybody. It wasn't a dude show only. You had the women extremely well dressed, which I think appealed to kind of the fashion sense of women. It had very strong women. The women weren't just like the paralegals. Donna, yes. But like the head of the law firm, was a woman. Jessica, I think her name was. So I think overall, Suits is a very underrated show, which I know it's hard to say it's underrated because now it's everywhere, right?
Like especially because overrated, yeah.
especially because of like Melinda Merkel, like it's always going to have a following. But I was comparing it to Sexy Beast because watching Sexy Beast, entertaining, yes. Addictive, yes. Good story, yes. Action, yes. Heist, yes. But like none of the characters I really liked. Like if anyone would have died, I wouldn't have been like, no, they killed Don. No, they killed this guy. No way. Like there was no one that I was emotionally rooting for. Had any one of them died or been like left the group or something, it would not have been a tragedy. There was no one really likable. And I think that's one of the distinctions between a good show and a really great show is to have a character that is like really, really, or more than one character who's really, really liked, And I think that generally you're supposed to have kind of the cool protagonist, and then you're supposed to have, the sidekick who's very annoying, but deep down they're good at what they do. You're supposed to have, the foil.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's a formula, right?
It's a cliche, but it's there for a reason.
Cliche, right? And I think that Suits did about as good of a job as you can imagine, kind of breaking that paradigm or that cliche. And that's one of the downsides I thought about Sexy Beast is that I just didn't like anybody.
Right.
I didn't hate anybody, but I felt like there was no one who was really likable. Gala's the main figure, but again, knowing what happens, he is engaged to someone, and she is by all accounts great. Like they intentionally make her be a great girlfriend / fiance, always saying like, hey, like I can get you a job with my dad's company. And she's very supportive, like not like overly wealthy, but she's saying like, hey, I'm going to do right by my man. Right.
Yeah.
He's attracted to the woman that, obviously ends up marrying, and you see in the film. And through it all, I wasn't overly judgy about it, but you know where it's going. And you have to say like, okay, the heart wants what the heart wants, but like, he's not a very good guy. Right. Like he may be the protagonist and the brains behind like all these heist operations and like the cool guy, but like, he's in no way a good person. Like he's absolutely like choosing a life of crime. And you don't know it unless you watch the movie, right? I mean, you don't know if he's going to get caught, if he's going to get killed, if he's going to be whatever, incarcerated. But at the time, you're like, he's choosing a life of crime and rejecting, by all accounts, a loving fiance, a very stable, happy life. His father-in-law loves him, like they watch football together, and he's rejecting all of this with like this web of kind of lies and deceit. And what's he doing in his spare time? Like he's stealing things, right? Or he's spending time with this other woman. He's not a good guy. And it's not like a moral judgment. It's just that no one in the show is really likable. And I think for me, that's one of the things that downgrades it from a strong must subscribe to a weak must subscribe, just because you're not emotionally invested in he's doing it for his, usually you see it like, oh, he's doing it for his sick daughter, or, he's doing it for his family. Do you remember this Jason Statham, based on a true story, that Jason Statham heist movie?
Yeah.
Where they break into the bank and they steal all the safety deposit boxes,
That's
right?
That's right.
There, what does he do? He rejects his old girlfriend, right? Who's always coming on to him. And he's saying, I'm doing this for my wife.
Yeah.
Like I'm doing this for my family. I want my family to be secure. I mean, it's totally misguided, and no one really believes that like you need to rob a bank. He could get like an advanced degree. He could get a promotion. Like, I mean, it's not the only way to do things in life, but you
can
at
continue
least,
being a mechanic.
yeah, like you could exactly. But you see his thought process kind of makes him a sympathetic figure, that he's like, hey, I'm trying to do right by my family. Misguided, not actually correct, but I think that's the difference between a heist movie like that and Sexy Beast, where here they're just doing it kind of like to screw another gangster, which isn't like a totally admirable reason. And his, I guess, personal life is, I don't want to say repugnant, that's pretty judgy, but like it's not for these pure great motives. Yeah. So the show is fantastic. I think you will love it. Like I said, I think it's absolutely, absolutely up your alley. and I gave it a week must subscribe, to the extent that that's a category, only because I just don't love any character. When I was watching this, I thought this would be one season and it would be done.
Right.
I thought it would end and it was going to be, this isn't the thing, but I'm just making it up. I thought they're going to steal like this huge diamond, and then, you know, like he's going to get out and like barely escape, and they're going to think, oh, he ended up with nothing. But then he pulls out like this pair of like rare diamond earrings from his pocket that he took like when no one was looking, you know?
Right.
And that was going to be like the retirement plan, you know? And everyone's gonna be like, oh shit, like we did all this for nothing. And he's like, ha ha ha, not so fast. I actually took this when no one was looking. It wasn't like that at all. Like it ended not mid heist, but like this wasn't obviously the big score. You know, it was a big heist, but it wasn't like the big score. And it clearly went to like, there's clearly going to be a season 2.
Awesome.
So I think you'll like it from that perspective. I was expecting to be let down, and I was expecting like with 2 episodes to go, I'm like, well, this is what's going to happen. Like he's going to break up with her. He's going to get together with her. They're going to steal something. It'll go badly. He'll narrowly escape. And you'll see them like on a speedboat, you know, to Spain. And that's going to be the end of it. Now we know how they got their start. Not that it was like a surprise ending, but it was a prolonged ending. And I'm sure they're going to get there by the end of season 2 or season 3 or wherever that is. But at the end of season 1, it was clearly, we're not there yet.
I'm impressed because I can't think of the last streamer skip assignment that you finished all the way through.
City on Fire.
Okay.
Sunny. Bad Monkey, Sabura.
Never mind. I guess you have seen a lot of these through.
I think what we really mean is that I haven't seen them to the end by the time that we had our recap.
Yeah. That's actually right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I was catching up this week. I also saw Time Bandits, which you suggested I go watch.
Oh, what'd you give it?
Skip. I gave it a mooch. But I totally understood where you were coming. And I also saw one other show you recommended.
Chaos. You saw Chaos.
I did, and I gave Chaos a skip.
It's horrible, right?
It was not my bag. Oh, and then I also finally started watching Masters of the Air, which so far I like a lot.
Yeah, I like Masters of the Air a lot.
Yeah.
If you like Band of Brothers, which I never watched, but I know that's a Steven Spielberg kind of World War II thing. I guess it's just kind of the Air Force Band of Brothers.
And I'm also a sucker for, you know, shows where there's one guy who's narrating the story.
Yeah, I agree.
I don't know why. I just am.
Narrating is really underrated, right?
Yeah.
All right. So streamer skip wise, what are the assignments for next week, Pete?
So next week, both of us are on Netflix. We're both watching new shows. You're watching a show called Nobody Wants This.
Okay.
And I'm watching a show called Fool Me Once.
What's Nobody Wants This?
No idea, but it's just it's a new show. I think it came up maybe in the last couple of weeks.
And what is Fool Me Once?
Also have no idea, but I think it's also a new show that's just come up in the last weeks.
Okay. In other news, I think it's only fair to tell our listeners I have canceled my subscription for Disney Plus.
What? Dun dun dun.
I mean, if I get an assignment, I'll probably sign up for it again, but I was not watching anything there. I started Always About Agatha. It's always been Agatha.
All along.
Agatha all along, fine. I knew it was always Agatha all along. Yes. I hated that show. I watched like 3 episodes and I was just like,
I'm out. Yeah.
It was like not just work. It was like a bad work assignment. You know, like sometimes like your boss is like, hey, can you like file this TPS report or something? You're like, oh, TPS reports, like that's the worst.
Yeah.
You're like, I'd much rather compile this spreadsheet or do this thing, or like these things I don't really mind, even though it's work, right?
Yeah.
I thought Agatha all along was not just like work, it was like the worst work assignment. Like it was really a slog for me to like get through those episodes. Even though I have to say, Agatha as an actress, I thought she was fantastic.
Yeah. Catherine Hahn's awesome.
Like I even like her character in that. I really liked her. Dare I say she had a little bit of Vince Vaughn, bad monkey kind
exactly.
of like she was great. Story, I don't understand at all. And every other character, I really hated. Tell me, am I off base on this?
You are not off base. I watched the same, I think this first 3 episodes, maybe the first 4 episodes, and I haven't bothered since.
Is this Marvel? Because we were introduced to her in
WandaVision.
And she was a little bit mysterious, kind of a witch, some purple powers and stuff, right? Then she got her own show. And it, as far as I'm aware, this has nothing to do with MCU. She's a straight up like Salem, nothing to do with MCU superheroes at all. She's like just a straight up like cauldron brewing, broom riding witch, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Am I missing anything?
No, this is the, I don't want to say it's the worst kind of spin-off, but this is a really poor spin-off.
It's horrible.
It's a poor spin-off because it doesn't add anything to the Marvel mythos that's, I think, interesting.
Yeah. Like I kind of thought she was going to be like this long. Remember when we watched The Boys and they had like this Nazi superhero come back, right?
Yeah.
And she was like rebranded as like Lightning or something. I thought Catherine Hahn was going to be like this long lost like superhero that was like banished, you know, like in the 70s or something because for whatever reason, right? And it's nothing like this at all. She's like just a typical witch. I love Catherine Hahn. And I even liked her character in this. I hated the story and I hated every single other person that she was interacting with. The casting I felt was like intentionally made to annoy me. I just didn't like anybody.
I'm not a fan. I haven't bothered with it. I don't know how it's going to end. I don't know why it was made, but it is what it is. And
yeah.
I expect that this is actually the last TV series that we see, or maybe the second to last that we see, which was part of the last generation of series that were greenlit with no real agenda. I think there's 1 or 2 more coming up, but then I think everything, they're making an effort to clean house. And I think that if and when we see more shows in the future, they'll kind of right the ship.
Did you like WandaVision?
I did not.
I felt it took a really long time to get to the point.
Yeah, I think that it was 2 or 3 episodes too long. I loved conceptually what they were doing.
Yeah.
But I think it just took too long to get where they were going.
Yeah.
And also had very little payoff.
Yeah, I agree. All right. Anyway, that's my rant about why I have canceled Disney Plus. And tell me if there's any other reason. Like, convince me.
No,
to stay.
you'll probably sign back on when the Skeleton Crew comes back and when Mandalorian comes back and when all of these other shows come back. But that's not for a while yet.
Yeah, but there's right now nothing. Pete, we've got our assignments. We're both on Netflix this week. Read off our YouTube creds and social media jazz before we sign off for the day.
Great. Tweet at us at F&S Podcast. DM us on Instagram at Films and Stuff Podcast. But as always, the best way to get in touch with us, like this video, leave a comment below, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell.
Absolutely right. Pete and listeners, been a pleasure. We had a long one today. Went through the good and the great of Sexy Beast and Dark Matter. We will catch you next week on the Films and Stuff Podcast. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Ethan. Thanks, everyone.
Bye now.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Films and Stuff. If you haven't already, please subscribe and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are downloaded. Films and Stuff. There is no substitute.